My name is Claire. 2 weeks ago, during an ordinary Tuesday dinner, my brother suddenly put his fork down and stood up like a man about to make a speech. He looked straight at me, his face red from the heat of the kitchen, and said, "You've been holding us back your whole life." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to, because every word landed heavy in the silence that followed. My mother nodded almost immediately, like this was something they had all agreed on long ago, and my father, instead of saying anything, turned his face toward his plate as if there was something fascinating in the gravy. I sat there for a moment with my hands in my lap and my mouth dry, feeling the way the air in the room seemed to narrow and press down on me. And then, without a word, I pushed my chair back, picked up my bag from the floor, and walked out of the house in Austin, Texas. I did not slam the door. I did not ask them why. I just stepped into the thick, warm night, the cicadas loud in the trees, and started walking with no plan, no destination, just the feeling that I could not breathe in that house for one more second. I remember the sound of my own footsteps on the sidewalk, how the humidity stuck to my skin, and how not a single person called my name behind me. The streets were quiet, except for the passing of a distant car and the rustle of leaves. I walked until the houses gave way to gas stations and closed-up stores, the kind of places that feel like nowhere. When I finally stopped, it was at a bench outside a closed laundromat, and I sat there with my bag at my feet, staring at my phone that stayed stubbornly blank. I waited a while, half hoping for one message, just a question asking where I had gone. But there was nothing. That night, I found a cheap motel by the interstate, handed over my last bills of cash to a bored clerk, and lay on a bed that smelled faintly of detergent and cigarette smoke. I didn't sleep much, only stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly, listening to the low hum of traffic outside. The next morning, I woke up to the same silence. No calls, no texts. Days passed like that, slow and heavy, and nobody came looking. This morning, though, everything changed. My phone lit up with 15 missed calls, all from the same house I had left behind. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, the sunlight cutting through the blinds in pale stripes, and stared at the screen, watching the notifications stack one after another, like they suddenly remembered I exist. I didn't answer. I let them ring out, one after another, wondering what could have happened in just 2 weeks to make them need me now, when 2 weeks ago they had looked at me like I was something to be erased. Somewhere between the buzzing phone and the cold coffee on the nightstand, I realized I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I left that night, without any plan except to be somewhere else, anywhere else. The heat of the Texas evening was still clinging to the pavement, but the light was fading, and every step felt like peeling myself away from the weight that had been pressing on my chest. The neighborhood streets were empty, a few porch lights flickering on, and I walked past houses that looked like mine but weren't, heading toward the main road where the sound of passing cars was steady and indifferent. I didn't stop until the glow of the bus station appeared in front of me, a tired building with windows smudged from years of hands and weather. Inside, the air conditioning felt like relief, thin and artificial, and the man behind the glass didn't even look up when I asked for the next ticket out. Denver was printed across the paper he handed me, and that was enough. I sat on the plastic bench with my backpack at my feet, counting the minutes until the bus arrived, watching strangers drift in and out, each of them wrapped in their own stories, none of them noticing the girl sitting very still, with her life folded into one small bag. The bus itself smelled of diesel and stale air, but the moment it pulled away from Austin and the lights of the city began to thin out behind us, I felt something like breathing again. I kept my forehead against the window, watching the sky turn black and the occasional highway sign slide by, naming towns I had never seen. The ride was long and loud, with the constant rumble of the wheels, and at some point, I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes, it was past midnight, and the driver was announcing a stop just outside of Denver. I got off with stiff legs and followed the small group of people who seemed to know where they were going. But as soon as the crowd scattered, I found myself alone again. A motel sat right off the road, its neon sign buzzing and missing half the letters. Inside, the carpet smelled like dust, and something older than dust. I handed the clerk enough cash for a room, and he gave me a key, without even glancing up from the television behind him. The room was small, one bed pressed up against the window, a table that wobbled if you touched it. I sat on the edge of the mattress, still wearing my shoes, and stared at the textured ceiling, tracing patterns in the paint, like they might tell me what to do next. My phone lay face down on the table, silent. No, where are you? Not even a single text. Only a single notification lighting up the screen hours later. A reminder about a delivery from 2 years ago. A Mother's Day gift I had saved up to send. A small box that I now knew was never even opened. I looked at that notification for a long time, then turned the phone over again, letting it go dark as the night stretched out around me. The next morning, I stepped out into the early light with the last bills of cash folded in my pocket and walked until I found a cafe tucked beside the bus station, the kind of place that opens before the sun is fully up. It smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant, but it had tables near the wall and a row of outlets, and that was all I needed. I ordered the cheapest cup they had, set my phone on the table, and stared at the blank screen for a long time before finally opening the browser. For the first time in weeks, I let myself think about what came next, instead of what I had walked away from. I found old tutoring platforms I had once bookmarked but never used. Filled out the applications with shaking fingers, listing every skill I had, every subject I could teach, anything that might convince someone to take a chance on me. The hours passed as I typed, retyped, refreshed, and typed again. I kept one eye on my email, hoping for a response, while the other was fixed on the charger cord snaking out of the wall, keeping my only connection to the world alive. By afternoon, a single notification appeared, and then another, and I read each message twice before I believed it was real. Parents in need of someone patient, someone who would show up. It wasn't much, a few hours a week, but it was enough to pull me off the floor of that motel and into something that felt like direction. That same evening, I found my way to the public library downtown, a place where anyone could sign up for a computer and a little patch of quiet. The building was cool, lined with rows of books, and smelled of paper and floor polish, a combination that made me feel steadier than I had in a long time. I claimed a corner desk, set out my notes, and spent the next hours building lessons, drawing diagrams, creating practice questions from memory. For the first time in days, I lost track of time. It was just me. The low murmur of people passing between shelves, and the slow feeling that I was starting to stitch together a different kind of life. Each dollar I earned felt heavy in my hand, not because it was much, but because I knew exactly how hard it had been to earn. That night, back in the small room I was renting, I let myself scroll through Instagram, out of habit more than interest. That was when I saw it. A new family photo posted just an hour before. My mother, smiling in a way that looked rehearsed. My father standing stiff but present. My brother in the center, his arm around a golden retriever I had never met. Behind them, the house looked exactly as I remembered, neat and bright, like nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. I stared at that photo until my eyes blurred, noticing not just who was in it, but who was missing. Me. There was no trace I had ever been there at all, not even in the shadows. A week passed before there was a knock on the thin apartment door, soft but steady, and when I opened it, Emily was standing there. She had been my neighbor for years back in Austin, and seeing her in this hallway miles away felt like a piece of another life standing on my threshold. She looked a little uncertain, holding something close to her chest, wrapped in both hands. Without a word at first, she offered it to me. A white envelope, unbent and still sealed, my name written on it in my own handwriting from more than a year ago. "I found this in your mom's desk drawer," she said quietly, like it was something fragile. My fingers didn't move to take it right away. I recognized it immediately. It was the letter I had sent the year I thought maybe there was still a way back, the one I had saved for weeks to include a gift card to her favorite cafe, thinking maybe a gesture could reopen a door. I took it slowly from Emily's hands and stared at the seam of the paper, perfectly intact. It had never been opened, never even considered worth opening. I walked back inside with her following behind me and sat at the small table. The room smelled faintly of cheap coffee and the detergent I had used to wash my only sweater, but I barely noticed. I tore open the flap and unfolded the note that I already knew by heart. "If there's still room for me in your life, let me know. I'm not asking for everything back, just a call. I miss Tuesday mornings. I miss you." I read the words like someone else had written them, because the girl who had put her heart on that paper didn't seem like me anymore. Emily sat across from me, hands clasped on her knees, watching my face carefully. For a while I couldn't speak. It was one thing to be forgotten. It was another to see proof that you had been set aside deliberately. Emily reached into her bag again, pulling out another set of pages, this time printed from a website. "There's more," she said, sliding them across the table. "I thought you should know." On the top of the page was my brother's face, smiling in a professional photo. Below that, the name of a brand new educational platform. I scanned the text, the headings, the layout, and felt my stomach tighten with every line. It wasn't just similar. It was mine. Every diagram, every section title, the words I had spent years refining were there under his name, as if they had always belonged to him. Even the opening description was word for word what I had written. Emily's voice was low, apologetic. "He said you gave it to him." The laugh that came out of me wasn't sharp. It was quiet, a single exhale of disbelief. I kept turning the pages as if the act of seeing it all in print could make it less surreal. But the truth was obvious. It wasn't just that they had ignored me. They had taken the parts of me that worked and claimed them as their own. The next morning I folded the printed pages Emily had given me, slid them into my bag along with the unopened letter, and walked downtown. Denver was cold that day, the kind of sharp cold that makes every breath feel like glass, and I could see my reflection in the tall windows as I passed them, shoulders squared, even though I felt hollow inside. I had found the name of a lawyer the night before, someone who specialized in intellectual property, and I sat in her waiting room with my hands tight around my bag until she called me in. I showed her everything. The old drafts stored on my laptop with timestamps from years ago, the handwritten notes I had scanned, and finally the envelope from my grandmother, the one that had always been my quiet anchor. In her familiar, careful handwriting, she had transferred the rights to everything we built together into my name. The lawyer read every page, leaning forward at certain sentences, her pen tapping softly against her notebook. When she finally looked up, she said, "You have everything you need. We'll make this official." It was the first time in a long time that someone had spoken to me like I had a place to stand. In the days that followed, the paperwork was filed. I rented a small room in a shared house on the edge of town, the kind of place where the walls were thin and the furniture was borrowed. But for the first time in weeks, when I closed the door, the space belonged to me. On the wall above the bed, I taped the copy of my grandmother's letter, and next to it a printout of my brother's website, not as decoration, but as a reminder of why I was rebuilding. Every morning, I sat at the little desk and made a list of the things I still controlled: my work, my students, my time. The calls began a few days later. First one, then 3, then a stream. They didn't leave apologies, just urgent messages asking me to talk and help save the family reputation. I let them ring. When my brother himself finally got through, his voice was tight, full of panic, asking me to say something that would calm things down. I said nothing. I waited until the silence on the line grew heavy, and then I ended the call. That evening, I opened my laptop and turned on the camera. There was no makeup, no light except the small lamp on the desk. My voice was steady as I held up each page, the drafts, the emails, the original diagrams, the legal papers, the signed letter from my grandmother. I explained it all piece by piece, careful and calm, without anger, without music, without editing. When I finished, I looked into the lens and said, "This is the truth. I don't need to yell to be heard anymore." And I pressed upload. Then I closed the lid and sat in the quiet, waiting to see what came back. When I woke up the next morning, the video had already started to move through places I had never been. Messages came in so fast my phone froze more than once. Comments from strangers and from people whose names I hadn't seen in years. Some of them said, "I went through the same thing," or "I thought I was alone." Others just said thank you. I didn't know what to expect when I uploaded it, but I know I didn't expect the sound of hundreds of people finding a piece of themselves in what I had said. My brother tried to fight back almost immediately, posting that I was bitter and lying, trying to twist the story so he would be the one who looked hurt. But every document I had shown, every date, every diagram stood against his words. People began asking questions he couldn't answer. Screenshots from years ago started surfacing, some from people who had worked with me long before he claimed my work as his own. Every time I refreshed the page, the ground under his argument gave way a little more. I didn't comment, didn't add anything. I just watched it all happen, with the kind of calm that comes when you no longer feel like you have to convince anyone. Weeks went by, and the noise of the internet kept churning, but around me things became quieter, steadier. I kept tutoring, working with the students who showed up on time, who tried, who listened. Their progress became something I could hold on to. I took on more hours, saved enough to stop living out of a bag, and found a small apartment with a door that closed and windows that let in the afternoon sun. I made myself a desk, hung up the same pieces of paper that had traveled with me from the motel room, the letter from my grandmother, the proof of ownership, the reminder of what I had built. In the middle of all this, a thought came back to me over and over again. How many people had been through something like this and had nowhere to turn? 2 months after the video, I filled out the paperwork and opened a small scholarship fund in my grandmother's name. It wasn't large, but it was real. And the first letters of thanks I received from kids who thought they had no way forward felt like a second kind of vindication. My family hasn't called since then. There have been no texts, no emails, no quiet knocks on the door. At first, that silence felt like the kind of emptiness you could fall into, but then I realized it was air, space I could breathe in. I've built a routine that doesn't include waiting for their approval. There are mornings when I drink my coffee and open my laptop, and for the first time in years, I am not bracing myself for a fight. I don't need their table to sit at anymore. Sometimes the best answer isn't to go back. It's to stay gone and build something new, something that belongs only to you. It has been a while since all of that, long enough that the shape of my days has changed. There are mornings now when I wake up, and the first thing I hear is just the sound of the city, waking outside my window, instead of the buzzing of a phone demanding I fix someone else's mess. My apartment is small, but it feels like mine in a way no house ever did. On one wall hangs a simple corkboard. Pinned there is the letter from my grandmother, faded a little at the edges, and next to it a note from a student I once helped who wrote, "You were the first person who told me I could do it." Those words hold more weight than any apology I never got. I don't wait for them anymore. I don't watch the phone, or the door, or the calendar. I teach. I save. I build piece by piece. And every so often I get a message from someone who found my story and says, "You made me feel less invisible." I think that matters. The silence that used to feel like punishment now feels like room to grow. I learned the hard way that you don't need to go back to belong. Sometimes leaving is what allows you to finally come home to yourself,